Okay. I don't know if anybody can hear me or hear what I'm saying, but yeah, I'm doing this as a experimental live stream. Uh, I don't know if this is even working. So yeah, say something if you can hear. All right, good, good. Okay. Well, I may have a guest tonight. I may have somebody calling me to see if that'll even work. See if that can see if I can have a conversation over the phone while I'm uh, chatting. So, yeah, I'm just doing this as a test, more or less. I plan on making this to become a regular thing in the future. As I as I use tonight to figure things out. Well, now this gives me a unique opportunity to discuss things uh, in a way that I can spend more time elaborating on certain topics. Okay, good. I see people. All right. Remember, keep in mind, be patient with me. I'm just figuring this out. So, yeah, I've never done this before. So this is a new and interesting thing. I'm looking at the chat to figure out how I work that feature here. So, yeah, let me see. Let me see. Live chat, all messages visible. Okay. But yeah, tonight I was going to take the time to discuss a variety of things, and yeah, I was going to have a guest call in, a fellow Iraq War veteran, a subscriber of mine, who I see as a friend, and I was going to see if he would call in, and we could have a talk over the phone while this stream was going, so that we could talk about the situation going on in the world as it relates to a foreign invasion and World War III. Yeah, I'm not putting my mug up tonight because for one, I don't look all that great. I still need to get my hair cut and my my barber's been booked. So yeah, I got to get a haircut bad, and I look like garbage. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it blank. But yeah, I that also helps me more to focus on the conversation and the topic, and not so much on you know how disheveled and how much of a bum I look like. So yeah, I'm going to. Oh, okay. Let's see. He's calling. Let me see if I can take the call. Okay, I'm back. I took a call, and I wanted to see if a call would work, and if I could have my guest caller talk with me over the stream. And evidently it doesn't work because I have a really primitive phone anyway, and it's not working that way. So I'll figure out another way to have guests on, uh, like with a panel perhaps or something like that. Can everybody hear me? Say something if you can hear me. Can people hear? Uh, okay, all messages are visible. Is it still working, everybody? Can anybody hear me? Say something if you can hear me. Say something if you can hear me, somebody. Uh, okay, you can hear? People are hearing me? Okay, good. All right. Anyway, all right, I'm going to start doing this more often now, and I'll get it figured out to where I can have guests on. But I guess I'm going to have to do a monologue tonight on this experimental live stream. I'm sorry it's kind of shitty, but again, I've never done this, so be patient with me. But yeah, I wanted to discuss all the goings on right now and all the things that I've been discussing lately, much in relation to the current path that the world is on as far as a collision course with a foreign invasion, World War III, and the collapse and running out of resources just prior to that, which will be followed up by a Syrian-style civil conflict. So let me talk more about the Syrian-style internal civil conflict. Now, if all of you understand what had gone on in Syria for over the last 10 years, then you understand that the Syrian civil war was essentially a mix of different factions, and basically what they did was they did have outside funding from the West and from other entities, but you also had the Assad regime, which was trying to hold Syria together, who also received outside help in the form of Iranian proxy forces like the certain groups, the terror groups, and the Iranian Pasdaran, which is like their elite paramilitary organization, as well as Iranian regular military support. And then Russia came in because they have their naval base at Tartus and their air assets, and they basically helped Assad to turn the tide with immense air support, missile strikes, and so on and so forth. But you see, because of the Western meddling, Syria broke up into multiple factions. But when we have our internal conflict, it'll be much the same in the sense that it'll be a factional thing, but it won't be stoked by anybody other than the political parasites that are in control, that are bankster puppets, or they're taking money from foreign powers to weaken us deliberately, as I've spoke on ad nauseum in many past videos. So, all right, when we arrive at this point, you're going to see very many causes to this occurrence. You're going to see it come about as a result of diminished resources, which is on purpose. It's deliberate. But it's been very carefully orchestrated because there are competing interests. As I've said before, these elites around the world, you have to look at them as if they're a mafia syndicate, like the Italian mob. I mean, they might have overarching goals, overlapping goals, but they're not unified by any stretch of the imagination, because they're driven by greed, just like the mafia, greed and status. So you have to understand that these elites, and we have different sets, like in the mafia, you have like the Genoveses and, whoever else, and they're competing for power and territory and turf. What you see right now is very much the same. You have these competing sets. You have very many dynamics in play with these competing sets. You have it to where political parasites, which are bankster puppets and even puppets of foreign interests, receive money from their benefactors and are told to carry out specific policies. Now, again, it's a well choreographed play that we see going on, but there's a lot of power plays and a lot of dynamics going on behind the scenes that people are not aware of and don't recognize, and they're not going to, because again, you have like an Eastern set of power players, of mafiosos, and you have a Western set. So I said all that to say this: you had basically an attempt to have a new world order. But you had the Western idea of what the new world order should be, and you have an Eastern flavor of what the new world order should be. You have power players like the CCP regime, and believe me, China only appears to ever play the games of the Western financiers and banksters, but they never really did. They didn't do all the things that the Western banksters did to cripple their own power base, i.e., the West, the Western nations. They tore down their own economies, their own financial system, their own resources have diminished, and you can look at it and say, oh, it's part of the Great Reset. But is it really? Is it really? I mean, who stands to benefit from it? It surely isn't they who thought that China and Russia and the other Eastern elitists would play by the same playbook. No. The East is going to benefit because they didn't play by the rules while only appearing to do so. Do you think that, this is an example. Do you think Vladimir Putin, a KGB man, a spy by trade, do you think that he is going to go to the World Economic Forum because he wants to obey the likes of Schwab and others? No, hell no. So like Monograph always put it, Russia and Germany have a lot of bad blood from the past. Absolutely. So you think this guy Schwab, who likes to role play and dress up as a, he likes to LARP. He likes to LARP as a Star Wars character. Do you think that he is actually going to take orders from that man? Hell no, he's not going to take orders from him. No, absolutely not. Oh, did they go dark on me? Did they not like what I was saying? Oh, okay, I see it. Anyway, basically, Schwab is a LARPer. He wants to, he talks a big game, and so do the rest of these Western elites. They have their grandiose plans for how they want their new world order, but China took very much advantage of them and their Western financial system to extract trade secrets, to extract industrial secrets, to build themselves up at our expense. So you basically have it to where China, had carte blanche to do whatever they wanted and take full advantage of the Western financial system back in the 90s and early 2000s, build themselves up, infiltrate and subvert us, and the Russians and the Chinese have been doing this forever. As far back as, as the 50s, this has been going on. Especially, the Soviets had been doing that even longer than the Chinese. But once the Chinese really sunk their teeth into us with Richard Nixon opening the door to China, the détente period, you had China infiltrating and subverting us to the fullest. They got their trade secrets, they got their industrial base built up, and they bided their time. They built themselves up while we were deindustrialized and torn down. And as a result of deindustrialization, we lost what? We lost our manufacturing sector. Now, you can't just tear your manufacturing sector down and just expect that you can, readily have it built back up when you now depend on a globalist economic system to get your resources, which again, China, they played us. They said, oh, you can have stuff built here for cheaper, and, we'll play your game. We'll get in on the globalist economic model, but now it's swinging, it's boomeranging back around on us, because globalism is a failure when your supplier is your enemy, like China, and I guess you can say Russia too, because they have all of these commodities and resources, as many of the people that I share on my playlists and channels have also stated, and I've been saying this forever too. I mean, there are a handful of people out there willing to tell the truth about everything going on, but you really, really have to look. You have to dig deep, I certainly have no agenda because, I'm just a guy who lives on his own. I'm a medically retired war veteran. I don't have an agenda. If anything, until I really woke up, I was very, very pro America. I was pro Babylon until I woke up, until I found out the truth, until I found out how badly we've been played, until I found out how badly we've been used. And, I don't have a dog in the fight other than to get people prepared for the future that is coming. It is coming. It is not up even for debate that it might not come. It is going to come. The numbers stipulate that. The facts stipulate that. Reality just all around us is stipulating that. I mean, look around you. You are now seeing the results of the boomeranging effect of what globalism has done to our way of life, our system. It is going to get to a point to where we will be third world. We are already having diminished resources because of bad policy making, because of deindustrialization, because of building up our enemies while we declined. Yeah, that's boomeranging. It's coming back on us right now. So, yeah, you have these competing sets, the Eastern set and the Western set. While the East only paid lip service to the Western idea of how they were going to do a great reset, they never actually did it. No. The likes of Putin and Xi Jinping, the leader of the most powerful country on earth, which is China, by raw numbers, by real numbers, America is only nominally a major power, but in reality, it's actually not. We've declined to the point to where our military is woke. It's poorly trained. You had all the really good, experienced people leaving the armed forces, and now you have this new generation in there that doesn't know what the hell they're doing. One specific example of this that is forever burned into my mind, and this is just one of many. This isn't the only time that something like this has occurred. But that exercise that happened out in California, I think it was at Camp Pendleton, if I'm not mistaken. It was the Marines against some of our woke allies, other woke allies, like woke Britain and woke Australia and the UAE, of all people. And they beat the Marines on their own turf so badly, in fact, that the exercises had to be reset because every last one of them was wiped out. And I'm talking about our guys, our Marines. They were wiped out. Well, I mean, how can these other, armies defeat, our Marine Corps if they too are so woke and so lackluster and so poorly put together? What does that say about the state of our ground forces? I mean, and that's only one example. Again, you have the Pentagon, which I call the pentagram. You have their own supercomputers since 2017, 2018, consistently putting out that we lose every war to China. And also Russia as well. We lose basically all the major simulated exercises with Russia also, but especially China, especially. And that is forever just burned into my mind too, because, these are quantum computers that they have there. I mean, they're calculating literally every factor. I mean, I have an analytical mind and I can see it, but I mean, these things are calculating information, data points that not everybody is recognizing and seeing, and we lose. I mean, my brain is not a quantum computer, but even I can see that the deck is badly stacked against us. Because for one thing, you're not going to fight the most powerful country on earth, China, or the second most powerful country on earth, Russia, or any other, or you might have like a second-rate power like Iran or North Korea or Pakistan or Belarus. You're not going to be able to fight them either when your armed forces doesn't have proper infrastructure, proper training, proper logistics. So people mean to tell me that we can collapse and simultaneously prosecute a major war, simultaneously make our military woke and give them all this just irrelevant PowerPoint training about how to be more woke and how to learn CRT and other things, and not their actual jobs, not give them as much range time because there's not enough training ammo to go around on some systems, and that's actually true. So you have all of these culminating factors. You have all the really good, experienced, trained people purged from our armed forces. Some of the pilots up and left because they took the dishonorable for not taking the mark of the beast. You know, these marks, these beast marks that they tried to force on everybody. So you have trained pilots leaving. You have trained ground personnel, specialists in certain categories leaving the armed forces. Leaving. And that leaves what? That leaves what exactly? That leaves conformists that conformed to the ludicrous regulations and training regime that's now in place. And you see evidence of it everywhere. You know, that cartoon of the recruiting commercial isn't a be-all, end-all sort of thing, but what it does do is it shows the mindset. It shows the mindset of the leadership, because they're the ones that sanction such advertising. Recruiting is at an all-time low. Yes, you can go look at it. Recruiting is at an all-time low. I told you before that our armed forces at one time was 2.4 million approximately, and it shrunk about 200,000, and at the current rate of shrinking, it'll go down to about pre-World War II levels in 1941. So, basically, you are going to have these this 1.8 million, 1.9 million large armed forces, all branches, all components, and they're going to do what exactly against a military and paramilitary behemoth like China with literally tens of millions? If you take their combat grade paramilitary forces and their regular active military as well as their reserves, oh man, yeah. So 2.2 million is going to do what exactly? Or even 1.8 or 1.9 when it gets to its lowest numbers ever, or since World War II, I should say, at least. They're going to do what exactly? And the collective West isn't much better. You look at Europe. I've literally showed you guys the numbers. I literally compared the four biggest European NATO contributors. I'm leaving Turkey out. I'm only talking about Europe here. I consider Turkey Asiatic because they are in the Middle East, which is Southwest Asia. So I leave Turkey out of the European NATO alliance. They're kind of like off on their own. And besides, their loyalties are questionable to NATO anyway these days. So I just leave them out. But when I calculated what Germany, Italy, France, and Britain have, the four biggest European NATO contributors, they do not have anywhere near the amount of numbers of equipment, troops, missiles, even things like shells, just basic items. They don't have anywhere near the number that Russia has. Russia single-handedly can crush NATO. If their technology is also on another league from NATO. They're their electronic warfare jamming, the hypersonic missiles, the way they can cloak their missiles, just everything that they have is far out of NATO's league. NATO does not have an answer to much of that. So again, this limited incursion that's going on in Ukraine of what, this little tiny 70 battalions, that is utterly annihilating and grinding down Ukraine's much larger armed forces, because Russia's big-ass military did not all go into Ukraine. They have to have strategic flexibility. They're not all in Ukraine. They are in other parts of Russia. They're also in Syria. They're probably over here in their Venezuelan and Cuban bases, and I would wager a guess that there's still quite a bit of them inside the United States as Trojan horse shock armies to be there to aid their Chi-Com allies who have humongous numbers here, disguised as illegals, disguised as students, quote unquote students, disguised as foreign guest workers with worker visas, disguised as everything in the book, business people. I mean, you name it. I'm not saying that all small businesses of these foreign people are all bad, but I am going to say that the CCP is the biggest owner of properties inside the United States. I'd say they and BlackRock and Bill Gates are the top three property owners. The CCP, BlackRock, and Vanguard and Bill Gates. I'm sorry, I forgot about Vanguard too. Yeah, they are. They form a quad of ownership in this country. So when you have all of these people, these foreigners inside this country, when I showed you my 96-hour invasion documentary, I didn't do that for shits and giggles. I did that because that is hybrid warfare. That is the plans. That is how they will literally do it. They will attack from inside and out simultaneously. So you're going to have this place falling faster than Blitzkrieg. Now keep in mind, Ukraine doesn't look all that impressive, but it actually is impressive because of this small force that they sent in there. It's a limited incursion. They didn't do the full-scale invasion that they're going to do here. And plus, you know, China, who is infinitely bigger in personnel, equipment. I mean, if you guys even understood the amount of gear and equipment that China has in storage, you would basically shit a brick. They have thousands upon thousands of stored away vehicles. They have hundreds of thousands of shells and rockets. They have tens of thousands of various types of missiles. I showed you guys the large missiles they possess, like cruise missiles and ballistic missiles of various kinds. I showed you that they have, you know, almost 20,000 missiles at their maximum count of large missile types. But if we'd go into all of the missiles, like anti-tank missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, if you talk about, you know, just basic missiles, and you combine just an entire missile category, we're talking hundreds of thousands of missiles. And also rocket artillery, because rocket artillery has rockets that you reload. So of all the reloadable rockets that go in the rocket artillery, which China has thousands of rocket artillery pieces, including storage and what's actually active at the moment, and all the other older vehicles that are still maintained but kept in storage, you have a freakish quantity of tank shells, rockets, artillery howitzer shells, missiles of all kinds and types and sizes. It's a myriad of various systems at play. And of course, when we also talk about other more advanced things, China too has hypersonic missiles. China too has various sorts of cloaking technologies. China too has very potent, powerful electronic warfare jamming systems. And evidence of that was what was done to F-35s that flew within range of their islands in the South China Sea that they've militarized, that they've turned into a basically man-made island floating military base. These antennas are so potent that they, hundreds of miles away, had made these F-35s very much nearly impossible to fly. The avionics were totally going haywire. The GPS that was virtually non-existent within the range of this thing. And then you had other issues, and it was exceedingly hard to fly, and they almost crashed into the sea. They barely made it back. Now, can you imagine if something like that is used in a conflict, and you're having an aerial battle with an opponent, and all of a sudden you lose the ability to fly your fighter jet? Well, we can easily understand and see how that would work out. And we can see that China won, America 0 in that category. So, yeah, and then they were the first nation to develop carrier killer missiles like the DF-21Ds, and now they have the DF-26B, which is an even further ranged version. So our carriers are virtually obsolete, totally obsolete. So basically, they've neutered our naval capabilities, and Russia too, because even on the coastal areas, Russia also has, they can use their hypersonics as shipping missiles if they so chose. They basically proved that with what they did with the Kinzhal and how they penetrated under 30 meters of granite and reinforced concrete to hit that submerged Ukrainian bunker. But you also have them easily being able to shift what they did with the Kinzhal to a floating target. It's not that difficult to conceive of them being able to do what China does, only, just shifting it from ground to floating targets. Because you got to understand, these big ships are not very fast. They're not fast at all. I mean, they're a huge target. I mean, they're just sitting out there, just floating along at what, maybe like, I don't know what it is. I think it's like 30 something knots, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know like a whole lot about the exact speeds that they're capable of pushing themselves to, but I know it's not very fast. So basically, I just wanted to say that, we have all of these things against us, working against us. The deindustrialization, you have our enemies that have built themselves up while only paying lip service to tearing themselves down, which is what the Western elites wanted, but they never did it, while we did it, while we shipped our industries overseas, while all these foreigners pillaged and plundered our industrial base and built their own with their stolen trade secrets, their infiltration, their industrial espionage. They've built themselves up while we tore ourselves down. And same with Russia. They've really, really revived themselves. And if you look at just if you look at the ruble versus the dollar, you could see that the sanctions haven't done a damn thing to the Russians while they're doing immense damage to us. It's really not that hard to see. You can go look at all this. I think the last count for the ruble to the dollar was 65 rubles to the dollar, and before the war it was at 80 something. So, I'm no fan of Russia, and I'm definitely no fan of China, but I can acknowledge the reality that empires come and go, and our days as an empire have ended, at least in the late 20-teens, because that was the nexus point while our enemies were coming up and we were going down. That was when we had a parity. That was when we were at a parity with our enemies. So, if you want to be real about it and not delude yourself with propaganda, if you want to look at the raw numbers, the capabilities, the facts, the figures, the economic stats, the financial stats. Oh, and by the way, guess who has the most gold and gold deposits on Earth? China. Guess who's number 2? Russia. Guess who probably sold all of theirs off by now or had it stolen in the greatest heist in world history? Us. Yeah, we should never, ever forget what these elites did back in 2001. What sat underneath those towers, I'll just call it. Yeah, we should never forget that that was one of the biggest, most underreported gold heists in all of human history. In fact, and not just that, but there's also the issue of the gold at Fort Knox. Does anybody even care or ask why they haven't done an audit there since the 70s? Does anybody even wager to guess why that might be? I can guess why that might be. Because we don't have it anymore. That's why. So, we can't back our currency with precious metals, even if we wanted to go back to a precious metal-backed currency, because most of the gold in this country is actually in private hands, and it's not in the Treasury's hands. It's not in the hands of the state. So if they did go back to Treasury control, they got rid of the Fed, and the Federal Reserve was abolished, and they went back to Treasury control of the currency like it was originally supposed to be, we could never back our currency with gold, not unless they did a massive gold confiscation, or not unless they found a new gold deposit somewhere, because we don't have it anymore. Because these elites, these Western elites, were busy tearing us down. That is yet another data point, another case in point of why what I'm telling you is without a doubt a fact. Because we know that their goal is to tear us down. But China's goal is to tear us down because their goal is colonization. And Russia wants Alaska back. They've said as much with their own mouth. Just like China's Wei Fang said that his goal is to eliminate or enslave the American people and take America for themselves, and that Chinese people would be good Americans as a joke, as a way of stating their intention of colonizing this land and depriving it from the people. So we know the intent. We know, and we can tell at the rate of the reserves of just the PLA skyrocketing that China's preparing for a massive invasion, a massive conventional war. So, yeah, when you see the PLA reserve go from 500,000 then to 1 million, and now all of a sudden this year it's at 5 million, and that is an accurate number. Yeah, they're preparing for a major conventional war, an invasion, because this is their regular military, not even their ginormous, gargantuan paramilitary of 20 million, which is the Marine Militia, the National Militia of China, which is like a paramilitary National Guard, the National Construction Corps, which is like it's like a paramilitary but armed version of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But in the Chinese version, it's a paramilitary, militarily trained and armed version of like what we have here with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So you have the National Construction Corps is part of the gargantuan Chi-Com paramilitary, which is like a whole separate army. It's like they have two different militaries. They've got their regular military, and then they've got their paramilitary, which is gargantuan. And then you also have the PAP, which is the People's Armed Police, which is like the new Waffen SS, and they are brutal. They are brutal. You need to understand the way that they've done the likes of the We to the Gers and other minorities in that country. You need to understand how brutally they've been suppressing them. They are fighting a low-level counter-insurge against the restive groups, I'll just say, out in Xinjiang. So in Xinjiang, out in western China, they are crushing restive groups and doing horrible things to them. This People's Armed Police is. So basically, you can expect the same or worse in any invasion when it comes here to roost. And it will. It's part of judgment for Mystery Babylon. So when it comes back here to roost, they are going to be very harsh on an unwitting, unsuspecting population because, let's face it, most Americans are in denial that we could ever decline, that we could ever be weakened, that we could ever lose something. But they don't even understand that the last major powers we ever fought was really World War II and Korea. Because in Korea, that was when China sent in help to bail out their North Korean pals. And they did. China, their new People's Liberation Army, which they called volunteers as a euphemism, but their new People's Liberation Army in the 50s, in the early 50s, after Mao Zedong seized power in communist China in 1949, they sent them right across the border on their first war mission, and their mission was to stabilize North Korea, to help what was left of the Korean People's Army to recapture the lost territory of North Korea. And at several different times, because in that war it was like a seesaw. Like one side would make good strides, and then they would fall back as their supply lines got too long, and they would fall back as they were withered down and long supply lines, the whole 9 yards. And then you would have the other side start pushing forward. So when the fledgling People's Liberation Army of the Red Chinese in the early 50s successfully helped North Korea stay afloat, that was really the last time we fought a major power directly. And if you think that fighting counterinsurgency wars makes us capable against a military force of larger size, no. Fighting little tiny armed militia type groups in third world nations that don't even have air forces, they don't have advanced weaponry. Fighting guerrilla warriors in Afghanistan and Iraq does not make us able to compete with the likes of China, Russia, or really any conventional force with the level of technology, size, professional troops that they have. Really. I mean, so what? I mean, we didn't even win there anyway in those guerrilla-style conflicts. So I don't understand how they think a depleted U.S. military, and they are depleted, they're depleted of their best people, like I told you, who have been purged for political reasons, who have refused to take the mark of the beast. Those people, those professionals, those really good, solid people that we used to have in our military, like back when I was in, it was a different military. It's not the same military now. And that is what Americans cannot come to grips with. You can't fix a problem when you don't even admit there is a problem. So the American people want to live in their fool's paradise and believe that we haven't declined as badly as we have. But you don't fix problems by being in denial. You fix them by acknowledging it, which they'll never do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I have any hope of this ever happening, because look around. It's a coddled, weak country full of coddled, weak, and a lot of obese and out of shape people that are brainwashed by propaganda. You have a lot of people like that in this country. And I mean, you can look around. Look how many people buy into all the tripe about Ukraine. Look, I mean, there's even people in alternative circles that buy into it. That should tell you everything you need to know. So you don't fix problems by not acknowledging they exist. You fix them by acknowledging there's a problem, and then not only acknowledging it, but then you come up with solutions. But we don't have anybody doing that. We've declined. And that is why I have said that this is part of our judgment. There's no other reason other than judgment if these things hadn't been fixed by now. And if the people can't see it because they're living in a fool's paradise, a delusional fantasy land, then nobody's ever going to realize it or understand it and fix it, because it's judgment. Everybody's under a spell. Everybody's believing propaganda. Like all this nuke hype. I mean, really? Really? So you think in a limited incursion that, like, okay, this is how Ukraine is to Russia, okay? It would be like if we sent in, like, 1st Cav and 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, which is my old unit, 3rd ACR. So if we sent in 1st Cav, 3rd ACR, and, like, I don't know, send in, like, the 1st Marine Division, too, to boot. Send in, like, 2 divisions and a regiment. Well, 3rd ACR is actually bigger than a regiment, but it's a regiment in name only. But it's really like the size of a brigade combat team. But that notwithstanding, let's just say that they sent in 3rd ACR, 1st Cav, and the 1st Marine Division into, into Mexico. And it's a limited incursion, because to invade a country the size of Mexico, you would need a whole shit ton more troops than 2 divisions in a regiment, right? Right? So what Russia did, sending in a very small force of 63,000 or so odd troops, maybe a few thousand more or less, whatever it is, they sent in roughly what equates to some 70 battalions. Well, in their various subunits, because these battalions, as I've showed you in my docu-series, in my 96-hour invasion and other series, I break them often down into battalion-sized elements that belong to their parent units. Well, okay, so you have these 70 battalions belonging to various parent units inside of Ukraine, and that's what you call a limited incursion from a military standpoint. That is not a full-scale invasion, because to invade a country of that size, or the size of Mexico, with my comparison with, like, if we invaded Mexico, you would need vastly more troops. It's like when people are trying to ascertain why Russia didn't take Kiev, it's like, duh. Kiev has like 3-4 million people in it, something to that effect. If you include all the suburbs and everything, it's roughly 4 million people. Okay, so how is a force, a pinning force, a feint force, because it was a feint attack, it wasn't a main attack, it was a feint. It was a pinning maneuver to pin down enemy troops so that in other parts of the country they could move elsewhere. Without having to worry about the Ukrainians being able to focus more forces in other areas, because you have to understand, 63,000 local troops that Russia sent in was drastically outnumbered. So for them to achieve the feat that they've achieved by grinding down the Ukrainian armed forces with 63,000 troops, that puts it in a different perspective, I would think. That's pretty damn amazing by any standard. So I don't know how people think that something is something that it's not, because we are in a time of war. You have news media becoming war propaganda machines. They're pushing propaganda, and it's just crazy what people believe anymore. They don't know anything about war. They sit there on their couches. They don't study the stuff. So they think they know something about how armies work, and they're believing all this mindless tripe that just comes through these outlets and everything. And it's ludicrous. You cannot believe the news media in a time of war. And I told you that a long time ago. In fact, if you remember correctly, when I told you about how it was a limited incursion, in that video where I was wearing the black t-shirt, and I said, if Russia wanted to, they could have used a lot more forces. They could have done it this way, this way, and this way, and this way, but they didn't, because it's not a full-scale invasion. It's a limited incursion. When I explained that the first time, I said you cannot trust Western or Russian media sources. In fact, It's best not to listen to media, period. It is best to consult figures and facts that, like things that can be irrefutable, things that cannot be refuted. It's best to also study history, current doctrines of warfare, and historical doctrines, so that at least even with the historical knowledge, you get the basic concepts down of these maneuvers and what they actually are. And it's not what the news is saying, it's what is how militaries operate. It's standard operating procedure. That's what that's saying, okay? They do things like feints to move forces around in other areas. That is a common tactic. So I don't understand how people think that the 76th Guards Air Assault Regiment and 1 battalion of Spetsnaz was supposed to go into Kiev and storm the city by themselves, because for about a month, that was all that was outside of Kiev. And how, that would be a first in the history of warfare if you could send in a force of some 4,000 to 5,000 troops to capture a city of some 4 million. That would be a first. That would be incredible. I mean, that would be a world record in all of human history. So people don't understand about war. But anyway, my point was, it would be the same concept. If we went into Mexico with those little tiny forces, 2 divisions and a regiment, and somebody had the nerve in another part of the world to say that we did a full-scale invasion on Mexico, when we in fact were doing a limited incursion. That is what a difference it is between full-scale and limited incursion. If it was full-scale, they would have committed far more forces than they did. But, they needed strategic flexibility elsewhere to deal with other areas, like areas that might be threatened by NATO, that they perceive to be a threat. You got the Baltic states, you got Finland, you've got, Finland and Russia have a long history of military conflict. So you have that, that's a traditional area of concern. And it's right near one of their largest cities, St. Petersburg. So of course they're going to need forces up there to contend with that. If it goes hot, they're going to need forces to contend with the Baltic states. They need to watch their Kaliningrad enclave on the Baltic Sea, because that's another territory of theirs they need to defend. Let's see, what else? They have to watch the southern Caucasus. They have to watch, because Georgia is always a questionable place. That's always a questionable nation as far as allegiances and intentions. Then they have to watch, Transnistria. They have to guard their interests in Syria. They have to watch the Russian Pacific Far East. They have to watch so many areas. That is a freaking humongous country, okay? They cannot commit their entire military to just one campaign, because what happens if something else occurs? No. So what did they do? They only committed maybe, 5 to, at maximum, maybe 10% of all of their forces that they gathered in that area in the Southern Military District and in Belarus, their ally. They had to gather some 200,000 troops, and of that, they only sent in about 63,000 or so, maybe 65, maybe a little less than 63, but it's in that range, because how I arrive at that number is I take 70 battalions and I multiply that by the number 800. Because of the typical size of a Russian battalion, it's between 800 and 1,000 troops. So, or I'm sorry, 900. I'm sorry, that's how I got that number. Anyway, I did the multiplication, and that's what I arrived at. So you have, realistically, that many troops grinding down a force that is 10 times their size in the local area. So it would be the same thing if we ground down the whole Mexican army with just like 2 divisions and a regiment. That's a limited incursion, okay? So, I said all that to go back to the whole hysteria thing. People are getting hysterical about this nuke stuff. But again, what I said earlier and what I've always maintained is that nukes are not going to be the primary problem. Will they be used? Yeah, sure. Yeah, they'll use some. They'll use some tactical nukes. Maybe a small handful of strategic nukes. But the vast majority of it will be conventional with other advanced means of prosecuting a war. Go and look at my documentaries. I literally showed you how hybrid warfare as an invasion plan concept works. And I ascertained that information by doing mountains of research into Sino-Russian war doctrines, especially on the Chinese end, because books like Unrestricted Warfare and other books that come directly from Chinese military institutions that were translated tell you what they're working on, what they're developing. And also numbers and stats tell the rest of the story too. So I figure so many things in when I write my hypothetical stories, when I create these scenario scripts for an invasion scenario, when I explain how hybrid warfare works. I taught a college course on it, more or less, for the average layperson, if they really want to learn about, how these things will work. I mean, all you have to do is go watch it, devote some time and go watch it. Yeah, I mean, it's a little lengthy, but if you can make the time, it gets better as you watch. I started out sort of bland because it was a new concept when I first decided to make these simulated battles and maps and things, but then it got, I added some more color coding to it and made it a little more, a little more or less bland so it would look better, and it gets better as you watch. And I made other explanatory videos that go along with it that are also in that playlist, like how the enemy forces are inside our country already and how they got here. All the steps of fourth generation warfare, aka hybrid warfare, the 4 steps of it. I explain it all. All these documentaries. I even made a Pacific Northwest map to show you another area, just as a separate documentary. But this one was more meant to show how terrain affects things instead of just the key types of places that the enemies will go for, like in the original one, like the installations, the cities, the human settlements and infrastructure, more things such as that. So basically, I just wanted to say that there's a lot of hysteria about nukes. There's hysteria about things happening because what you get is some sort of pundit who has corporate sponsors, who has an agenda. I'm not going to name names because I'm not that type of person. I'm not that person. I don't do that unless somebody attacks me personally, okay? Or if it's just something that's that horrible that it needs to be addressed. But otherwise, I'm not going to talk about people behind their backs because that's not what type of person I am. Unless it is something severe enough or serious enough that it literally warrants that type of thing. There is people that I am very against, but I won't say anything about them because that's not who I am, okay? But I will say this much. Be leery of people that have corporate sponsors and script writers or, people in that category. I have friends, and they are friends that will, in their shows and their streams, they read, they read articles, and that's fine. But when you read these articles, I would caution to use discernment and make sure that you do a little background digging on certain things before, they get put out. And again, I have nothing but love for a lot of my friends on here. I love all my friends on YouTube. They're great people. They're wonderful people. But when it comes to reporting news stories, be very, very careful. I'm saying that as a friend to give caution. It's just meant as a cautionary thing because I don't want anybody to look bad or anybody to, get smeared for being, wrong or what have you. You pick something. People get ridiculous anymore about things because all you're trying to do is warn people, and then they come back at you when something might not happen or whatever. And then they want to pick a bone with you over it and start a whole bunch of drama. I don't have time for that, okay? And I know my friends feel the same way. And I don't want them to have to deal with stuff like that. So all I'm saying is when it comes to people with like corporate sponsors and script writers and people that got, humongous overnight, that didn't get, that you know what I'm saying. Be very cautious with that type of thing. Be very cautious. Be very cautious. My channel will never, ever grow beyond 3,000 subscribers because they hate what I say. In fact, so much do they hate what I put out that anytime I try to mention the work to other people that might not know about it, deleted, gone. Comments instantly gone. Gone. All gone. So, yeah, I got somebody calling me right now. What the hell? Okay, sorry everybody. Yeah, so basically you have to be very, very cautious. You got to do a lot of your own due diligence, do a lot of research, and arrive at your own conclusions. You cannot listen to media of any kind and unless you're taking it with a major grain of salt. So I do all my own research. I am a facts and figures, numbers, capability, statistical type of person. I'm a history researching fool, and I'm a current events junkie, but I make sure I validate everything with, facts and figures. Because there is so much nonsense out anymore these days that people have to be very, very leery of what they're reading. Because remember, in a time of war, there's going to be propaganda from all sides. So you have to be very cautious, and you have to be careful of hysteria, like all this nuke stuff. Yes, when we get invaded, they'll use some nukes, but that's not going to be the primary issue. The primary issue is going to be humongous conventional forces who want our farmland, who want our resources, who want to colonize this land and not make the whole place an irradiated graveyard of unusable land and resources. So, yes, when I tell people that you need to be prepared for a foreign invasion, I'm not crazy. There is nothing crazy about that statement. In fact, that's about as close to reality as you're ever going to hear from anyone. Because it's painfully evident when you look, again, going back to where I started at the beginning, it's painfully evident when you look at everything that's happening, when you look at our enemies that didn't tear themselves down, but they built themselves up instead. They built themselves up while we tore ourselves down. It's painfully evident that we're not going to be ready when we get invaded. It's painfully evident. How can you defend yourself when you don't have a working logistical and transport system? When you don't have everything you need, resources? My God, I mean, how are you going to, produce anything if you had to do a draft? If you could even have time to do one, you're not going to have time to do one because there's foreign troops, there's Trojans inside of our land that would make any such move impossible. It would be impossible to do a draft because when we get invaded, there's going to be Trojans and Fifth Column and other bad actors and foreign military units that begin inside this country that would make such a thing impossible. But let's entertain the idea that even if it was possible to do a draft, let's say that your transit networks have cut down supply shipments, coal and diesel, whatever, what have you. They cut it down 50%. Oh, then it's cut down another 25%. So now you're running at 25% of coal deliveries and other things. So basically, and diesel too for the farmers. How are you going to feed your troops when you can't grow crops, when you can't till the soil, when you can't run farm machinery? How are you going to feed your troops? How are you going to produce armaments when your factories have no power to run off of, because factories consume a ginormous amount of electricity? You're not going to run it off of solar and wind power. No, hell no, no. So realistically, how are they going to ever hope to defend this land from a foreign invasion? Now you can see where I'm coming from. You can see that this is quite impossible because we've torn ourselves down while they built themselves up in China, in Russia. China is the new hegemon in real numbers, by number of gold, by economic numbers, purchasing power parity. When you adjust their numbers to purchasing power parity, they far surpassed us a while ago. See, our economy's built on funny money. While they have a robust industrial and manufacturing sector, they have a high technology sector now that they've developed after reverse engineering and building their own indigenous capabilities. So now they have a high tech sector. They have a robust service sector. They don't depend on crazy Ponzi schemes and financial games and other things there. No, they have real numbers. They're like a wrecking ball to what a fake economy is. This is a house of cards that we're built on. They have the biggest, most powerful military, biggest, most technologically advanced Navy, biggest Air Force, most tech advanced now, because the types of fighters they have now are incredibly complicated compared to what they had, just 30 years ago. And the most technologically advanced army too, in real terms. The way they've integrated their tech, their electronic warfare, their cyber capabilities, their high precision weaponry, the way they've integrated all of those things into older, but also into newer systems that they're constantly putting out. Their tanks, their newer tanks, they're no slouch. They're newer tanks, they're newer helicopters, they're newer fighter jets, like the J-20, and even newer ones that are coming out. They have a new bomber coming, a new stealth bomber too. Their electronic warfare is phenomenal. Their radars have improved. Their air defense and anti-ship missiles are so powerful that our carrier groups cannot even hope to sail through the Taiwan Strait. If they do, and it's a time of war, they're sunk. In a time of war, they're sunk. I mean, let's be real. Unless, short of a limited incursion, if China did decide one day they feel like taking all of Taiwan, they'll overrun that place so quick, there won't be time to send them anything. Russia did a limited incursion, but if Russia so chose to do a full-on invasion, oh yeah, the way I explained it in those past videos, they easily could have, but they didn't do it that way because they need strategic flexibility. But China's a different story. They're massively bigger than Russia militarily. But all I'm doing is rambling. This was an experiment tonight to see how this would work, to see if I could take calls while I'm on a live stream, and all that. I'll have it figured out to where I can start a panel and have guests and set all the other stuff up next time. I'm really just getting the hang of this. I hope this turned out good. I hope this was clear and able to be heard by everybody. I hope people enjoyed it. This is the longest by far that I've ever just been able to just talk and say what was on my mind. So, that's good to be able to do, and I plan to make this a quasi-regular thing from here on out. So I wanted to say my thank yous, and I wanted to thank everybody for being here. And yes, just like my dear Jen says, it's truth, and I try to always be truthful and in the best ways I know how. I don't speak about topics I don't know anything about, but what I do speak about is stuff I know to be the God's honest truth. I don't lie or intentionally mislead people. I only speak about the things that I know about, and anything else, don't ask me. Don't ask me, because I don't know. But when it comes to the whole military history and current military affairs, international military affairs, and so on and so forth, doctrine, strategy, equipment, that is my area of expertise. That is the stuff I feel comfortable speaking about. So, yeah, that is the stuff I will continue to talk about in future shows. And I would like to have guests on so that my guests can talk about other topics so as to keep it interesting and not always the same thing every show. So I will get all the kinks worked out in that, and I hope to see everybody again soon. All right, I have to figure out how to turn this off, so I guess that's it. Thanks, everybody.